Έτσι και κανένας αριστερούλης διεθνούς γνώσης πάει χτυπήσει το πόδι του σε καμιά κοντρόνα, γίνεται πρώτο θέμα σε όλα τα ελληνικά μέσα ενημέρωσης, δυστυχώς. Εν πάση περιπτώσει. Μάλιστα, τελευταία έγραφα και λέγω ότι δεν καταλαβαίνω πώς υπάρχει τέτοια αιμονή σε αριστερές αντιλήψεις στην Ελλάδα. Όταν οπουδήποτε έγινε προσπάθεια να γίνουν πράξεις αυτές οι αντιλήψεις, οδηγηθήκαμε σε αδιέξοδο και πολλά από αυτά τραγικά αδιέξοδα. Εν τούτης εκεί. Είναι αυτό που λέμε άγωνη γραμμή, Άγιος Κήρυκος, Καρλόβαση και πάει λέγοντα. Να ευχαριστήσω λοιπόν όλους για την εδώ παρουσία. Εγώ δεν θα σας κουράσω άλλο. Απλώς να σας πω ότι την επόμενη Πέμπτη, γιατί κάθε Πέμπτη ουσιαστικά κάνουμε εμείς εδώ τις εκδηλώσεις μας, σήμερα έγινε Τρίτη λόγω ιδιαίτερων συνθηκών. Την επόμενη Πέμπτη θα έχουμε τον κύριο Γιώργο Πίτρο, τον νομότιμο καθηγητή του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, ο οποίος θα έχει ένα ιδιαίτερα ενδιαφέρον θέμα να αναπτύξει, η επόμενη μεγάλη οικονομική κρίση. Αν η επόμενη δεν είναι μεγάλη, σκεφτείτε ότι είναι αυτή και τι θα μας επιφυλάσει η τύχη για το μέλλον. Άρα όσοι από εσάς θέλετε να είστε παρόντες την άλλη Πέμπτη, καλοδεχούμενοι. Παρακαλώ, ο κ. Γιώργος μας κάνει την πρώτη μία εισήγηση για τον ομιλητή και στη συνέχεια ο κ. Brook.
Thank you very much for coming here. You're really, I cannot say enough about how thankful I am that you all responded to the call to come to this lecture. So I would like to ask a question to start with. Does anyone here like being a slave? No? Does anyone here like being forced to do things under the threat of violence? No? Great. So this is the right crowd for this lecture. So before I begin my introduction of our speaker tonight, I would like to go through a few procedural calls with you. So would you please switch off your mobile phones and turn them to silent as a respectful speaker. And if you could be patient with your questions, there will be a question and answer session at the end. So please keep notes of your questions and you'll get an opportunity to ask those. And if some of you like to mix intellectual stimulation with fun, after the event we'll be going down to some bar or somewhere to eat, so please feel free to join us. Now I would like to talk to you a bit about the Liberty Forum of Greece. It was founded by a group of freedom-loving individuals who spotted a gap in Greek think tanks. They saw that there was a lack of publications that are free market oriented. There was a lack of think tanks that would advocate laissez-faire capitalism, that would advocate free trade, that would advocate individual rights, classical liberalism, and an open society. And so our mission is to advance and promote exactly those ideas. We want to create a wave of people that understand freedom and promote it to whoever they know. So this is why we do all these events. We hold lectures or panel discussions or debates. Sometimes we hold book presentations every first Tuesday of the month at a bookstore called the Free Thinking Zone. And we've recently done some discussions about the role of women in the economy. We've done a discussion about entrepreneurship and freedom, and lots of other interesting things. I'm sure you will really enjoy to attend, and I'll be very happy to see you there. We also did an event last year, or a couple of years ago, in honor of Ayn Rand, which is my favorite topic. And it was also the time I last visited as well the Liberty Forum. Our aim at the Liberty Forum is not to force you to agree with us. I know there's differences between our opinions. We want to capture your interest and to provoke you to re-examine your thoughts. Now, with regards to Ayn Rand, I know that she's not very well known in Greece, so I'll give a very brief introduction to Ayn Rand. She was born in 1905 in Russia. She was born under a different name. The Russian Revolution started, and her family faced a lot of difficulties. So later on in her life, she managed to escape the communist regime and moved to the US, where she changed her name to Ayn Rand. She started working as a playwright at first, but then what she noticed in her life there is that there was the US culture was shifting in the same way. It was following the footsteps of what she had already seen happening in communist Russia. So she decided that the best way to act against this was to use the medium that she knew how to use best. That was writing. So she wrote some very famous novels, Anthem, which is going to be published by the Liberty Forum of Greece in Greek in February on Ayn Rand's birthday. The Fountainhead, which has already been published in Greek as Kondaston Yaron, With the Living, which is a Mrs. Odani in Greek, and it's on sale there. And also her biggest and most famous book is Atlas Shrugged, which has been published in Greek as O Atlas Epanastatis. And then again, you can buy the book there at the table that Free Thinking Zone have brought here. So we kindly thank them for this contribution. Now, I found out about Ayn Rand at the age of 27, and it really changed my life. So until that point, I thought, okay, I'm a free market guy. I understand why I like free markets, because they work. But I also thought, you know, it's a necessary evil. It's something that works, but there's many negative connotations around it that I still was skeptical about. And then I read Ayn Rand, and this is what Ayn Rand offered me, was the moral case for capitalism, for free market capitalism. And this is very crucial in order to win the hearts and the minds of people, rather than just bore them with endless statistics like economists tend to do. She does it in a magnificent way in her novels. Then I would like to get to our speaker. Our speaker is Yaron Brook, Dr. Yaron Brook. He's the director of the Ayn Rand Institute. I met him in London. He was giving a lecture at the university, and I attended that lecture. His speech was amazing. It really showed me that there is a way to sell free market capitalism to people without being boring, and that is an amazing achievement. I wasn't used to that, so I thought, okay, I've got to get this guy to Greece. I've got to bring him so that my fellow Greek citizens listen to him, and maybe they will get the same ideas as I got when I listened to him. So, I have a little anecdote to tell you as well before I finish, and this kind of shows how relevant Ayn Rand's and Yaron's ideas can be to the common man, as opposed to an intellectual or a kind of economist, PhD in economics or something. On my way back from the event, I took a taxi. It was a bit late, and I had a few drinks as well, and it's a bit of a way from my home where the lecture was. So I took the taxi, and we were driving, and I was already fueled by the enthusiasm that Yaron had in his discussion. So I gave to the taxi driver the speech of my life. I don't know what I was talking about, but I kept talking to him about free markets and liberty, freedom, everything, all of that. So we got to my place, and the taximeter said 38 pounds. So he tells me, don't worry, just give me 30. Now I thought, that can't be true. I'm not hearing well. So I took out my wallet, and I took £20 note and 2 10s. I hand it over to him. He says, no. Just give me 30. I don't want 38. I told you, take the 10 back. I said, why? Why you did it? Because I really enjoyed your lecture, he said. You were amazing. You gave me a fantastic speech. It was a pleasure to meet you. So, please, give a warm welcome to Dr. Yaron Brook and pay attention because who knows, maybe we'll be able to save some money on the taxi pack.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? I'd rather not stand over there and use the microphone. So, everybody here in the back? We're good? Good. Thank you, George. Thank you for sponsoring today's event. I disagree with one thing George said. I would actually have loved it to have some leftists in the audience. It would have made the evening much more interesting and much more fun. And maybe we would have changed some minds. I have a feeling you all agree with me already, so this is somewhat preaching to the choir. You know, all of us, or many of us, who believe in free markets, who believe in capitalism, who believe in kind of economic liberalism, we face a real challenge. We face a real puzzle, if you will, a brain puzzle, a teaser. By the way, there's a seat up front here, and there's a seat in the second row. So, this is the puzzle. Capitalism works. Everywhere free markets are being tried, they generate a higher standard of living, they generate wealth, they generate prosperity. Poor people are better off under capitalism than any other system in the world. It works. And we know it works because in history it's worked. Whenever it's been tried in history, in the United States in the 19th century, in Great Britain in the 19th century, in Hong Kong in the 20th century, it's been an incredible success. People have thrived. Individuals have done phenomenally well. They've created wealth, technology, standard of livings go up. And again, the poor, which everybody seems obsessed about, and we can talk about this obsession with the poor, they do better under capitalism than any other system. And I dare anybody to show me statistics that show otherwise. It's just not true. 250 years ago, how many people in the world were poor? Everybody, except a small percentage of aristocrats who exploited everybody else and stole their wealth and kept everybody poor. By the standards of 250 years ago, how many people are poor in the West today? None. None. And why? Because of markets. Because of capitalism. Because of the wealth created under whatever amount of free markets we've allowed to exist. Yes, we try to redistribute it, and we get into trouble, and we revert to free markets, and we create a little bit more wealth, and then the socialists come to power again, and they redistribute it, and then we free up the economy a little bit. And this is the question we have. We see it. We see it every single time, with every single experiment. You know, just look at UK with the Thatcher Revolution. Wealth was created, standard of living went up, life became better. They can complain as much as they want, but the statistics, the data is there. So capitalism works, free markets are good, most people are better off, and yet, we move away from them. We reject them. In the entire West, we are moving away from capitalism. And even if we move a little bit towards it, it's usually only temporary. And let me just tell you, because I know you guys in Greece are in a little different situation than we are in America. But America is not a capitalist country. No country in the world today is a capitalist country. They're all mixtures. There's some freedom, and there's a lot of government. And in America, there's a lot of government. And that portion of the economy is growing. Government is growing in America. The percentage of GDP that the government spends is growing. Dollar spending is growing. Regulations are growing. Redistribution of wealth is growing, in spite of the fact that we know that free markets work.
How do we know?
because we have eyes. All you need is eyes, in my view. All you need is a minimal knowledge of history. And if you have questions about any particulars, ask me in the Q&A. I'd be happy to answer any of the particulars. I'm going to take off my jacket. We know, because if you study history, it's right there in front of us. We know, because how many of you have ever been to Hong Kong? Okay. This is my recommendation. Once in your life, make it to Hong Kong. Hong Kong 75 years ago was a little fishing village in the middle of nowhere. It had no natural resources. It had nothing. And then the British came along, and all the British did was establish property rights. They protected property rights. And what happened? People from all over Asia came to this middle of nowhere rock. And they established a thriving city. Skyscrapers put New York today to shame. They are so beautiful and new and magnificent. 7.5 million people live in that fishing village today. The GDP per capita, a measure of individual wealth, not a very good measure, but a measure nonetheless, is equal to the United States of America. In 75 years, with nothing, no natural resources, no subsidies, no help from anybody, a minimal safety net. People swam there, people got on boats there, people went there because Hong Kong gave them freedom, gave them opportunities. They got to keep what they made. They got to be in a free market. And when we say free market, what do we mean? Free of what? Free of intervention, free of coercion, free of regulation, free of government control. Where voluntary exchange, the state does not get involved in the middle between voluntary exchange. So in my view, and I'm willing to be challenged in the Q&A, but in my view, the evidence is overwhelming for the success of capitalism, for the success of free markets. And you can see it, again, ask me in the Q&A, we can go over this, because I don't want to get, because we can do 3 hours just on the history of capitalism easily, right? The question is, why is everybody so resistant to these facts? Because they are facts. They are reality. And yet nobody wants to see them. Nobody wants to acknowledge them. Nobody wants to accept them. You show them to people, and they look at it, and they say, no, that's not there. They ignore reality. I'll give you a little example of this. This is true of economics generally. If you know basic economics, then it should be pretty self-evident, for example, that a minimum wage increases what? Unemployment. It's basic supply and demand. Right? When you have a good and you price it above its natural price, what happens? Some people can't afford to buy it anymore. Well, if you price labor above its natural price, some people can't afford to hire. And therefore, some people are unemployed that would otherwise be employed if the minimum wage were lower. Who gets unemployed under the minimum wage? Rich kids? Poor, unskilled, young kids. They're the ones who get unemployed. And this is basic economics. This is not hard. This any student in economics should get, right? And you teach it. You go into a class and you teach minimum wage causes unemployment about poor, young kids, right? Unskilled labor. And what does this do? This prevents them from getting a job. So maybe the minimum wage is $10, they can only produce at $5, so nobody hires them. So since nobody hires them, they never have a job at $5, they never develop the skills to make $10 or $12 or $100 or $1,000 an hour. And therefore they're institutionalized into poverty. Well, basically the minimum wages is a way to make sure that poor people stay poor. And you can show this economically, and you show it on the board, and all the students go, yeah, we get it. Supply and demand, this is simple, right? And then you ask them, the next class, a day later, you ask them, well, how many of you for minimum wage? And almost every hand goes up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The facts don't matter. the theory, the science, doesn't matter. And the question is why? There's something in us. There's something deeply ingrained in our culture. Now, funnily enough, not in ancient Greek culture, but certainly in modern Greek culture, there's something deeply ingrained in us that hates capitalism. We hate free markets. We hate it instinctually. We don't even think about it. And we know every financial crisis that happens, who's to blame? Before we get the data, before we do the research, before we know what happened, who's to blame? Markets. Capitalism and usually bankers, and it used to be Jewish bankers, but that's politically incorrect, so we don't say that anymore, we just say bankers. Right? Bankers are always to blame. Capitalism's always to blame. Free markets are always to blame. Now, when we look at the data later on, we discover it's not so simple. It's usually the central bank's fault, it's usually the government's fault, but that we look later on, we find out. But immediately, the immediate response is, it has to be the markets. The markets failed, the markets are to blame, capitalism's to blame, because we so hate it, we so despise it, that it just comes up. And this financial crisis, the later financial crisis, is a perfect example of this. People tell me that capitalism caused the financial crisis in the United States. Because in 2007, we had free markets, and they failed. That's a joke, right? 2007, who had free markets? Banking in the United States is the most regulated business in the world, in the US, right? And it was the most regulated business in the US in 2007. Mortgage business, the mortgage business, right, was the second most regulated business in the United States in 2007, and it failed. The housing market, not one of the most, but a very regulated business, it failed. The three most regulated businesses in the United States failed, and we blame the free market. What free market? There was no free market. Now, we can argue about what exactly caused it, what combination, but you cannot, in logic, in reality, you cannot blame capitalism. There was no capitalism. Do you know that every bank in America was regulated by 5 different regulatory agencies? Every decision a bank in America made had to be approved by a government bureaucrat. Every single one. Do you know that at JP Morgan, the big American bank, every day, over 129 government officials go to work at JP Morgan. They have offices at the corporate headquarters of JP Morgan, and government bureaucrats from the regulatory agencies work there every single day. Free markets? This is complete control. I mean, to even call banks private banks is dubious. How private are they? Private, you're supposed to make, when you have something that's yours, you're supposed to be able to make decisions about what to do with it, independent of some bureaucrat. But here the bureaucrat has to sign off on everything you do. 129 people go to work at JP Morgan who are employed by the United States government. Remember that. When anytime somebody tells you America is a capitalist country of free market, every one of the big banks has these people in the bank, employed right there. And yet, now my theory is, I can give you my short version of financial crisis, happened for 3 reasons. One, Federal Reserve kept interest rates below the rate of inflation for 2.5 years. We call that negative real rates of return. When you have negative real rates of return, you're giving an incentive for people to borrow money. Very simple. You're paying them to borrow money. Guess what everybody did in America? They borrowed money. Now, why did it all go into housing? Because in 1999, the Clinton administration decided that 70% of Americans should own houses. The Bush administration supported that. They told Freddie and Fannie and everybody else that they need to buy those mortgages and increase the percentage that they own. So there was massive subsidization of the mortgage market in the United States. At every level there's subsidization. At the tax level, at the repackaging level, when Freddie and Fannie buy the mortgages, at every level. I'm not going to get into all the details. Some massive subsidies for homeownership. What happens when you subsidize something? The price goes up. When the government is buying anything, the price goes up. Third, moral hazard. Too big to fail. Deposit insurance. You tell bankers, You can take on as much risk as you want. If you gain, you get to keep the profit, and if you lose, we'll bail you out. Don't worry, be happy. Guess what they do? They take on lots of risk. And I can give you another 20 reasons why the banking system failed in the United States. All to do with regulations. All of them. And yet, the minute the crisis happened, what was the headline? Capitalism has failed. Free markets have failed. Banking. This is what happens when you allow banks to do whatever they want. What? Whatever they want. That's ridiculous. So what's going on? Why is it? What is driving this hatred? What is driving this instinctual response to capitalism, to free markets, to banks? Well, what is capitalism about? What are marketplaces about? What is the market about? Any market. What's it about? Why do people go to the market? Why do people sell? So why does Steve Jobs make these? Well, he's making it to make money. Make money for whom? For Steve Jobs, for Apple. Now, is it only about money? Why else does Steve Jobs make these? I mean, made. Fortunately, he's not with us. Why did he make these? I mean, it's not only about money, right? I mean, how many of you go to work only for the money? Yeah, because he loves it, right? He's creative, he's innovative, he likes to see the product of his mind in reality. He enjoys it, he has fun. But making the iPhones is all about Steve Jobs. It's about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs made this, not because he cares about me, not because he cares about any of you. He didn't wake up every morning and say, how can I maximize social utility? He didn't wake up every morning saying, how can I help my neighbor? He woke up every morning saying, how can I make the best, most beautiful product I can and make lots of money doing it? Steve Jobs was in this for himself. When I went to buy my first iPhone in 2008, the US economy was spiraling out of control, and I wanted to stimulate the US economy, so I went to buy the iPhone. Because I want to make sure there were jobs and people, right? I mean, that's why you go to the mall, you go shopping, because you want to help your fellow man. You want to make sure you buy into the Keynesian idea that if you shop, employment will increase and production will happen, and you care about Greece, so you shop. Now, of course not. Why do you go shopping? Why did I buy the iPhone? Because I needed it, because I thought it would be cool, because I wanted to make myself more productive, because I go to the mall because I want to wear nice clothes, because I enjoy it. Because I do it for whom? For me. The marketplace is a place where we go to pursue our self-interest. The marketplace is about self-interest. Now, this isn't new to me or to Ayn Rand. Adam Smith told us this in The Wealth of Nations, 1776. The baker doesn't bake the bread for you. He bakes the bread to make a living for himself. The guy who delivers the bread doesn't deliver it because he cares about you. He delivers the bread because he cares about himself, his family, the people he has to feed, the people he has to take care of. Markets are driven by self-interest. Self-interest is the driver of capitalism, the driver of free markets, the driver of all markets. And what are we being told about self-interest? Since we were this big, what did our parents tell us about self-interest? Now, I can tell you what my mother told me, right? My mother's a good Jewish mother. And she told me, think of yourself last. She didn't mean this. Nobody ever means this stuff. But this is what's preached, and this is what goes into our psyche. Think of yourself last. Think of others first. What is, in our culture, nobility? What does virtue mean? What does goodness mean?
Altruism.
What's that?
Altruism.
Altruism. Altruism, by the way, is a term, just so we're clear, coined by Auguste Comte, the 19th century French philosopher, and it means not being nice to people, not being friendly, not opening doors. It means devoting your life to other people's well-being. It means becoming others' servant. If you think, when you help somebody, if you think, oh, I'm going to feel better because I helped them, it's not moral according to Comte. Right? So we've been taught that nobility, virtue, goodness are all about self-sacrifice and what we do for others. And the more we sacrifice for others, the more noble we become. Because if we help other people and we benefit at the same time, do we get moral credit for this in the culture we live in today? Do we consider, let's take an example, right? Bill Gates. Everybody know Bill Gates, Microsoft, right? Bill Gates made, I don't know, $70 billion for himself. How did he do that? How does any businessman make money? How do you make money in a market? You sell a product that people want for a price people are willing to pay for it. Why are they willing to pay that price? Why are they willing to pay $100 for a piece of Microsoft software? Because it's worth more, how much to them? More than $100. Otherwise they wouldn't bother to give up the $100. So the buyer of Microsoft product is what? Is better off because he's got something worth more than the $100 he gave up. Okay? And Microsoft is better off because they sold a product that's worth less to them than $100. The beauty of trade in a free market, uncoerced, voluntary trade, is that it is win-win. Both parties are better off, or at least that is their intention when they enter. You know, you can sometimes buy what's called a lemon, a bad product that you discover afterwards, but you enter the trade expecting gain, expecting to be better off. So Bill Gates made $70 billion. How much do you think we made? The world made off of Microsoft products? What's that? Many multiples of this. Trillions of dollars. The world is better off because of Microsoft by trillions of dollars. It's hard to calculate, but the world is a completely different place. Microsoft has made better almost every human being on the planet. Does Bill Gates get moral, ethical credit for changing everybody's life and making the world a better place? No, because he made money doing it. He made money doing it. Now, when did Bill Gates become a good guy? When he became a philanthropist. He left Microsoft, not making any more money, and now he's only going to devote to giving. Now, we still don't completely trust him. He's still not really a moral hero. Why? Because he seems like he's enjoying it. True. And he still lives in a big house and flies a private jet. So what would it take? What would it take to make Bill Gates a saint? I mean, I haven't talked to the Pope, so I don't want to talk to the Catholic religion. But what do you think would make Bill Gates a moral hero? He'd have to give it all away. He'd have to move into a tent, and if he could just bleed a little bit, just a little bit of blood, then we would all say, now none of us would want to be him. Remember, none of us want to be the saint. But we would say, wow, now that is moral. That is noble. We don't like it. We don't want to be it, but we think it's morally beautiful. Now that is sick. That is sick. That is a sick culture. A culture that says building something, creating something, improving the lives of everybody through trade, through voluntary transaction, that is barely, no nobility associated with that because it's for profit. But sacrifice yourself. Swallow in the mud, show blood, suffer. Oh, that's beautiful, that's noble. I mean, think about it. Mother Teresa, who barely helped anybody, read her diary, barely helped anybody, is a saint, is a moral hero to all of us. Bill Gates, who made a gazillion times greater impact on the world, on poor people in the world, is nothing. Not on a moral perspective, nothing from a moral perspective. Now that is a morality that's killing us. It is killing us. That is the morality that doesn't accept capitalism. Because capitalism is about self-interest, and we're told that self-interest is bad, that altruism, selflessness is good. Businessmen are not selfless. None of them are. They can pretend to be, but they're not. Therefore, they're not moral. And therefore, we have to constrain them. Because what do we know that immoral people do? If selfishness, if self-interest is bad, What do we associate? What behaviors do we associate with self-interest? When we point to the kid in the schoolyard and say he's an egoist, yeah, he hurts others. It means he's a SOB, right? He's a lying, stealing, cheating, bad guy, right? That's what self-interest means. That's what we've been taught, right? That's what this morality teaches us. So to be a businessman means to be a lying, stealing, cheating thief. And when we catch one of these businessmen who are crooks, and there are crooks among businessmen, what is the conclusion the culture comes to? We caught one, they're really all crooks. We figured out one of them. Now where are the rest? How do we catch the rest? And how do we manifest that? We manifest that in regulations. Regulations are there to catch the crooks. We know they're all crooks, now we have to catch them. There was a famous case in the US in the early 2000s, Enron, you remember Enron and WorldCom? There were some crooks, real crooks, and they caught them. And American culture went, they're all crooks. We got to go out and get the rest of them. I was in, you know, Bill O'Reilly, the Fox nutty commentator. I was on a show, and Bill O'Reilly wanted to fire every CEO in America. Why? Because we found 5 who are crooks, therefore they all must be crooks. And why must they all be crooks? Because they're self-interested. All they care about is profit. That leads to all this bad behavior, right? So, think about, in the US, when you walk into an elevator, like there's a little diploma on the elevator thing, on the wall there, that says that a government regulator, government bureaucrat, has inspected this elevator and it won't fall and kill you. And I always go, oh, I'm so glad. Because if not for those government bureaucrats, we know that elevator manufacturers would build elevators that killed us. Because you know that the best way to make money is to kill your customers. I mean, if not for food inspectors, McDonald's would poison all of you. Right? I mean, I tell that to business groups and they go, no, well, wait a minute, no, we don't do that. You can't make money by poisoning your customers. But yes, we think they will. We think they will. So we want a bureaucrat. Now, why do we trust bureaucrats? Not this group, but generally, why do we trust bureaucrats? What motivates a bureaucrat? What's the incentives? Is it self-interest? Forget you read Buchanan. Is it self-interest? No, they're doing it for the public good, for the general welfare. That we trust. We like that. The elevator manufacturer, oh, he's self-interested. He's in it for the profit. We don't trust him. Think about banking. Think about central banking in the U.S. at least. 100 years ago exactly, the United States founded the Federal Reserve, right? The Fed prints money and everything. Before the Fed, there was a very influential banker called J.P. Morgan. Very powerful. You know, had a huge amount of power in New York. And one of the reasons the Fed was founded was because people said, wait a minute, this one private guy trying to make money has too much power. So we can establish a Federal Reserve that has like 1 billion times more power, but we trust it. And why do we trust it? Because Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke are not in it for the money. They're public servants. They care about all of us. J.P. Morgan, he only cared about himself. And you can see this pattern over and over and over again. We don't trust business because it's about profit, and profit is self-interested, and self-interest is immoral, and we don't trust it. And what do we trust? We trust people who tell us they're there for the public interest. We trust people who supposedly care about everybody. We trust people who are, in it for society, not in it for themselves, who are selfless, present themselves as being selfless. That's the presentation. I went to a lunch once for businessmen, Lifetime Achievement Award for business leaders, right? And there were 5 recipients, and they read these long biographies, told all about their life and everything. And they spent 1.5 minutes on their business achievements, and 10 minutes on their community service and charity. Now, I have nothing against community service and charity, but give me a break. Where did these guys have an impact on the community? Where did these guys have an impact on their own lives, on taking care of themselves and their families? Where did these guys spend most of their time, most of their energy, attain most of their self-esteem and happiness? In charity? No. in their work, in their business. That's ignoble. But their philanthropy, their community service, ooh, that is so noble. That is so good. How many people does charity actually help? How many people does business help? It's no comparison. When we went from 250 years ago, from all being poor to today, when we are pretty well off, how much of that was charity? Almost none of it. How much was it business, wealth creation, value creation, trade? Almost all of it. And yet, we don't value that. We value the charity. Same thing. We value selflessness. We don't value self-interest. Redistribution of wealth. Why do we redistribute wealth? Same argument. There's some poor people here. They don't have the best health care. They don't have good health care. Right? You guys have a lot of money. You've made a lot of money. It's your moral responsibility to give it to them. Because you should be selfless. You shouldn't keep it. You should give it to them. And you're not giving it to them. So we're going to take it from you and do your work for you. And by the way, you shouldn't resent us, because all we're doing is helping you to be more moral. Now you laugh, but this is exactly the argument made in America. And the rich vote, do rich people vote to increase taxes or lower taxes on the rich? Increase. So when Obama ran for president, he told everybody, I'm going to raise taxes on the rich. Of the 10 richest counties in America, how many voted for Obama? 8. In California, we just increased taxes on the rich by 30%. From 10, this is a state income tax, from 10% to 13%. Did the rich vote for it? Yeah, absolutely. Silicon Valley all voted for it. They're all going to be taxed more. Now why? Why are they voting for it? Because they feel guilty. Because they don't give enough, because they're poor people over here. And it doesn't matter that the poor group keeps growing and growing, and their needs keep expanding. It used to be food and healthcare, and now it's cell phones and cars and air conditioning and everything else, right? It doesn't matter. They have more. And they're made to feel guilty, so they vote to raise their own taxes so that those guys can get more. That is the power of morality. That's the power of ethics. People, again, I'm talking about America, do not vote their pocketbook. They don't vote their economic interest. Marx was wrong. It's not all about economics. People vote what they think is right, what they think is just, what they think is fair, what they think is good. And the left completely dominates that. The left has defined justice as equality, fairness as equality, goodness as equality. And what do? We quibble about economics. When we should be saying, no, that's not just, that's evil. Equality is evil. You won't say it, but I will. Equality is evil. Because what does equality mean? How am I going to be equal to Michael Jordan in basketball? The only way to make me and Michael Jordan equal is to break his legs, and you haven't seen me play basketball, you know that you'd have to break his arms as well. The only way to make people equal is to take people of ability and knock them down. And that's what those who advocate for equality advocate for. For coercing those who have, those who are able, for breaking their legs. Taxes is just a form of breaking people's legs. So what we need, in my view, is completely rethink morality. Is completely to rethink ethics. And it's great to be here in Athens as we do this. Because what we need is to rediscover the ancient Greek perspective on ethics, which was not about selflessness, which was not about self-sacrifice, which was not about giving. It was about living. Living as an individual. Living a flourishing, successful, prosperous, complete life. Even Plato, who is not my favorite philosopher, I think the villain of history, ultimately, would have been horrified by the notion of self-sacrifice as the virtue. Even he believed that the purpose of virtue is to lead the good life. as an individual, which means happiness. But the good guy in history, the good guy in philosophical history is Aristotle. And for Aristotle, this is exactly what morality is about. It's about the individual living his life for himself, to make his own life the best life that it can be, to achieve flourishing, success, to achieve his own well-being. Aristotle is the first philosopher of the morality of self-interest. Indeed, all the Greeks to some extent were about self-interest. But Aristotle used logic and reason to apply it to the issue of self-interest. In my view, what Ayn Rand does is she takes that Aristotelian project of defining the virtues that are required to achieve flourishing. Eudaimonia, I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. You guys will correct me later, right? But she's completing that project. She says, no, your life is yours. It's not your neighbor's. You are not your brother's keeper. You're your own keeper. Your moral responsibility in life is to live your life. To live it the best that you can for your own sake. You are not a slave. Your life does not belong to other people. You don't have this commitment to sacrifice and to serve for the good of others. Your commitment is to serve you. Now, what does that mean? What is the value that it makes our lives possible, that makes flourishing possible, that makes every value that we have possible? Well, selfishness, but what is selfishness going to require? Because as a biological species, as a physical biological species, if you look around the room, we've got plenty of proof that we're pretty pathetic. It's supposed to be true, right? Just look at your neighbor. We're not very strong, we're not very fast, we don't have claws, we don't have fangs. You try running down a bison or a buffalo and biting into it and trying to eat it. You can't do it. You try coming up against a saber-toothed tiger. You can't do it. Well, now it is. But when we started out, it wasn't. And the question is, why is it extinct and not us? Because physically, we should have died off a long time ago. What is it about us that makes it possible? Corporation, but what comes even before corporation? Intelligence. You have to have a mind. Every value that we have out there is a product of somebody's thinking, of somebody's reason, of somebody's rationality. Again, this is Aristotle's discovery, right? We are the rational animal. That's what makes us unique. So if you want to take care of yourself, you have to use reason. Be rational. You have to think. But look, every value out there, I mean, how many of you have the gene for making clothes? How many of you know how to cooperate to make clothes? Somebody has to figure this out. And maybe it's a team, but even in a team, does a team have a team consciousness? Is there group consciousness? Is there consciousness floating about this room that represents us? No. Should be self-evident, right? The only consciousness is your consciousness, my consciousness, individual consciousness. There's no group think. There's no mind out there. There's no group rationality. Only people think. Only individuals think. And we can help each other. We can cooperate. We can make each other better. But we still have to act and think as individuals. So Rand's morality is a morality of rational self-interest. It's about applying reason to the question of making my life, every one of our lives, the best life that it can be. And somebody who practices that, what kind of society we want to live in? If we want to pursue our rational values to make our life the best life that it can be, what kind of society do we want to have? What is the enemy of reason? Enemy of reason is? Irrationalism. But what is the manifestation of irrationalism in action? It's force. The enemy of reason is force. The enemy of reason is force. When you're coerced to do something, your reason doesn't matter anymore. What you think is irrelevant because you have to do what the coercer tells you to do. You might want to go left, but if you've got a gun in the back of your neck, saying go right, you have to go right. Your reason becomes irrelevant in the face of force. So a rational, self-interested person wants force extracted from his life. He doesn't want to have to deal with force. He doesn't want to be coerced. He doesn't want to be told forcefully, what to do. He wants to be independent. He wants to live his life based on his mind, based on his reason, based on his actions. He might be wrong sometimes. He might fail. But a rational person doesn't fear failure. He embraces it. He learns from it. He gets better as a consequence. So, a rational, self-interested human being wants a society where there's no force. And for that purpose, and in my view, that purpose only, he creates government. Government is that entity in a social setting which is there to extract force from society. It's there to protect us, to protect our rights, to protect us from crooks, from thieves, from villains, from fraudsters, from enemies from external, to be the final arbitrator of disputes with the justice system. But that's it. No self-respecting human being wants a paternalistic mother on their shoulder telling them what they can and cannot eat, what kind of business they can and cannot open, what kind of accounting they can and cannot do. They want to be left alone, to figure it out, to be challenged by the world around them, to make the best life that they can for themselves, independent of other people's forcing them. And did they lie, steal, or cheat? Is lying, stealing, and cheating a rational thing to do when you're pursuing eudaimonia?
Yes.
Really? Maybe in Greece, I don't know. I hope not.
Everywhere.
No. How many of you have lied? Don't. Lying sucks. It's a terrible strategy. It's a terrible, terrible strategy. If you do it consistently in business, nobody will do business with you. If you do it in your personal life, just try it with your spouse on a regular basis. She will leave you. If you do it with your friends, they won't be your friends for very long. Lying is an awful strategy at every level.
That has to be explained at length in this environment.
In your environment, maybe, yes. It shouldn't be. Because I think for my part, look,
It runs contrary to the
I'm reaching the age where I can barely remember what I did last week. It's true. If I lie, I have to remember two things. Well, actually I have to remember more than two things. Because not only do I have to remember the lie and the truth, I have to remember who I lied to and who I didn't lie to. And then I have to remember why I lied to them and why I didn't lie to them. I can't do that. It's too hard. It's going to mess this up. This is my tool of survival. This is what allows me to survive. Again, in a free market. This is what allows me to survive. If I screw this up, I screw my life up. I mess my life up. There's a term in computers. Garbage in, garbage out. You put garbage in here, you're going to get garbage out. You put lies in here, you put deception in here, you steal, your life is going to be miserable. It's going to be miserable. Now, if you've created a culture in which lying is rewarded, then it's a disastrous culture and it will collapse and you will all suffer the consequences of it. Maybe I'm in it, but that's all of our problem. It's not a good thing because it's antithetical to what it means to be a human being. We are designed to deal with facts, not with lies. We're designed to deal with reality, not made up stuff. Bernie Madoff, who made his wealth lying and cheating, is today in jail. But the interesting thing about Bernie Madoff is he tells us he's happier in jail than he was before he was caught. Because when you live a life, when you're lying to everybody you care about, when you're lying to your family, to your friends, to everybody around you, you are miserable. You are miserable. Bernie Madoff couldn't sleep at night because he was worried about being caught. Not by the government, but by his sons, who ultimately did catch him. Turned him in. One of his sons committed suicide as a consequence. Lying is the most self-destructive of strategies. It's not self-interested. It's these altruists and these selfless people who want you to believe it's self-interested. Because they want self-interest to be associated with all these bad behaviors. Because they present you with this dichotomy. Be selfless, be altruistic, or be a lying-stealing SOB. That's the alternative Western civilization presents us today. It's just not true. There's a third alternative. Be a rational, honest, independent, productive human being. Live. Live. That's what life really needs. And if we could convince young people that that is what life really is about, then you get capitalism, then you get free market. Because those kind of people won't have it any other way. They won't tolerate it. As long as we live in a society where altruism and selflessness and sacrifice is worshipped, we will lose. We are losing. We will continue to lose. Even if we have short-term victories, we will lose long-term. Just ask Thatcher and Reagan. Right? They lose long-term because they don't change the fundamentals. So what we need, the revolution I call for in my book, is not an economic revolution. It's not a political revolution. It's a moral, ethical revolution. If we want to win the battle for freedom, if we want to win the battle for capitalism, we need to change the morality of the culture. We need a moral revolution. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yaron Brook. It always perplexes me when advocates of big government suggest that it's within human nature to lie and cheat in order to achieve your goals. Because always have to think, so who do they propose to put in government if not humans? Is it aliens that are not going to be cheaters and liars? I don't understand how they solve this problem. But anyway, thank you, Doctor.
Take questions.
Can we take some questions, please?
Can we move the microphone
Oh,
around?
you want that to?
Just in case you
Yeah.
want some
To
people.
what extent do you...
He wants you to speak into the microphone. Sorry.
I would say, to what extent...
Doesn't work. Okay, now it's your move.
Is it on?
Ask.
Anyway, to what extent would you blame this situation in Western society that is influenced by Judeo-Christian ethics for this morality?
You're going to get me in trouble right off the bat, huh?
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind that Christianity has a huge role to play here. Christianity is the first ethical system to arise in the West that preaches a morality of self-sacrifice, of self-denial. I mean, the symbol of morality, this symbol of virtue, this symbol of goodness is a man dying on a cross for other people's sins. That is what we're all supposed to strive for. That is a real problem. The issue and the problem is further, that nobody has questioned that morality. That is what happens. Secular philosophers, instead of challenging that morality, they secularized it. So if you look at Immanuel Kant, at Augustine Comte, they all consider themselves, at least Kant did, as Christians, trying to save Christian morality from mysticism, from the mystic, and secularize it. So for Kant, for Immanuel Kant, who I think is the most influential philosopher of the 20th and 21st century, morality is about duty. Duty to whom? Duty to others. And again, if you think about yourself too much, it's not moral. If you meet a happy man, if you meet somebody who's happy, self-confident, don't trust him, because he's probably self-interested. Suffering is virtuous. That's straight out of a certain type of Christian doctrine. So yes, Christianity, again, the Greeks didn't have this, at least my understanding of Greek philosophy, didn't really have this concept of self-sacrifice and self-denial. It wasn't a core, certainly not with Aristotle, right? It's Christianity that really brings it to the forefront. It brings it as a major, ethical program, and nobody in the last 2,000 years, with the exception maybe of Spinoza and Ayn Rand, have been willing to challenge the Christian dogma with regard to ethics. And that's what needs to be challenged. That to me is the enemy, and that's why it's so difficult. It's so difficult because it's 2,000 years of being ingrained. It's difficult because it's not just religion anymore, it's all the secular teachers as well. It's the whole thing. And now we have to tell them, no, the moral code that the culture has been surviving on for 2,000 years is no good, we need to replace it. That's a hard venture, and that's why we're failing. Because it's so difficult.
Let's go from that way to the back.
Yeah, and then we'll come back to the front.
I can't help feeling that you shortchanged capitalism. On the question you had. Capitalism isn't only about my self-interest. It's also about my duty to respect everybody else's right to their own self-interest. It's in my self-interest to steal your wallet, but it's my duty to respect your right to your wallet and not to do so. And I think that's a subtle point, perhaps, that is extremely important to emphasize it, because you're absolutely right in saying that the battle has to be won or lost on morality and not on economics or self-interest.
So I understand your point.
Sure. Just one more, perhaps a little bit on the facetious side. If lying doesn't pay, how come politics is such a profitable profession?
Lying doesn't pay. Have you ever met a happy politician? I haven't. They're miserable. They're pathetic human beings.
They're pathetic.
They're pathetic. No, they're pathetic human beings. Inside, they're pathetic human beings. Just look. All you have to do is look at Bill Clinton. You can see how pathetic a human being can be. They are not what Aristotle considered flourishing. They are not. And if we believe that one can flourish as a human being by living off of others, then capitalism is wrong. Because I don't agree with you about, I don't like the word duty. I don't believe we have duties. I don't think it's in your self-interest to steal. I also think that if you steal, yeah, you should be put in jail. That is, it's my self-interest to defend myself against you. If I expect other people to respect my right to my wallet, it is my responsibility to respect other people's right to their wallet. Because it's universal. I don't consider it a duty, because duty has negative connotations in my philosophy because of the Kantian duties. But it's a responsibility. There's no question. And it's meaningless to say in ethics, I have a right to my wallet, a moral right to my wallet, but you don't have a moral right to your wallet. That is a meaningless ethical statement, because ethics has to be applied to everybody. So if I have a right to my wallet, by logic, you have a right to yours.
Okay, thank you very much.
Am I allowed to comment a bit on your lecture and have a bit of a discussion by incorporating my views? I will be short. First of all, I have to disagree about unemployment. That's a soft issue. Unemployment, suffering poor and young kids unskilled. That's not the case, I think, globally. Over here in Greece, we have young kids with master's degrees and PhD, and they're still unemployed. Are you aware of the TED channel? TED channel. It's pretty.
Yes.
Have you ever watched Sir Ken Robinson's video of schools killing creativity?
No, I agree with schools killing creativity. That's one of the issues, one of the big issues.
Because all the education system is it's crafted by academics for making academics, not making use of skills of kids, and they don't teach arts and things like that. So I think that's the case. We globally have an issue of skilled people, highly educated, young, and being unemployed.
So let me answer. In Spain, youth unemployment, unskilled unemployment is at 50%. Skilled unemployment, still high, but way below 50%. In America, if you've got a college degree, unemployment is very low. If you don't have a college degree, if you're poor, if you're black, if you're in the inner city, unemployment is very high. If you eliminated the minimum wage, I can guarantee you all those kids would have a job. This is, again, economics 101. The victims of minimum wage are the poor, unskilled kids. Now, I'm not saying that's the only problem in the world. I was trying to make a narrow point. I was trying to make the point that even when you show people that simple little formula, they still reject it. And they reject it because of the morality of it, because thinking of raising people's minimum wage makes them feel good, because they feel selfless, because they screwed the employer, right, because he has to pay $10 an hour instead of $5. And they feel good about screwing the employer. It's not about helping kids. If it was helping kids, we would have a zero minimum wage. Now, I completely agree with you about the educational system. The educational system is terrible. It's terrible in Europe, it's terrible in America, it's terrible everywhere. I mean, imagine if we had real innovation in education. But how are we going to do that? How do you bring innovation and brain power and people thinking creatively and competition into education? There's only one way to do that.
We punish mistakes, if I may say
You
so.
privatize it. Privatize it. The state will destroy education. It has destroyed education. If you give the state to produce electricity, they'll destroy it, and they'll make it expensive, and the quality will go down. If you give the state the responsibility of baking bread, the price will go up and the quality will go down. If you give the state the responsibility of making clothes, the quality will go down and the price will go up. If you give the state responsibility over your kids' brains, guess what will happen? They'll get a lot of junk in there. They'll get mush. They won't be educated. What we need is to privatize it. Instead of people going and making the next app for this, they should go and start a school. They should go and try to compete in a private, innovative, competitive educational market. That's what we need. We should stop. I mean, the idea that in America, I'll just give you an example in America. Okay? If you want to send a letter and you want to make sure that it gets to the location the next day, you have an option. You can use the post office, run by the government, or you can use FedEx or UPS. What do you think 100% of people do? FedEx or UPS. They'll never use the post office if it's really important to get it. And yet they have no problem dropping off their child at the post office every day. Because it's the same mentality running the post office that runs public education. Same incentives, same structure, same bureaucracy, same top-down central control. That's why our kids are struggling. That's why our kids can't compete, can't deal with the world. It's because they're getting a lousy education. They're getting a lousy education because it's provided by government. So we should be fighting for private education.
May I just say a bit about morals and ethics? Just being Greek and studying ethics at school, at university here in Athens. How about combining Plato, Aristotle, and our religious culture, irrespective of dogma? How about starting on agreeing, like Plato said, on basic principles, like truth and self-evolvement, and then incorporate Aristotle's sense by being self-assertive, and a bit of Christianity by being compassionate. Full stop.
So when I look at the food to eat, I don't try to mix the healthy vegetables and fruits with cyanide, with poison. The mixture is going to kill me. Plato is poison. Plato is cyanide. And so is Christianity, in my view. Plato tells us about truth, that it's unknowable. You can't tell what truth is. Only the philosopher who deals directly with the world of form, which is way over there, that none of us can achieve, only the philosopher knows the truth. So Plato is wrong from beginning to end. I have a lot of respect for him because he tries to use reason, and he's a philosopher, and he's before his time and all of this, but he's wrong on everything. The whole of Western civilization history, since the Greeks, has been a battle between Plato and Aristotle. It's all a battle between the two. When Plato wins, you get the Dark Ages, you get communism, you get destruction, you get war. When Aristotle wins, you get the Renaissance, you get the Enlightenment, you get the Industrial Revolution, you get capitalism. That is the fundamental battle. Mixing them destroys the good. What we need is commit ourselves to Aristotelian philosophy, and I think the modern heir to Aristotelian philosophy is Ayn Rand. But that's what we need to be committed to, rather than mixing good stuff with bad stuff. It's bad. There is no world of forms. Reality is here. We need to live here in this world as we see it. We don't live in a cave. We don't see shadows. We see reality as it really is. And that's Aristotle. No, we need to find the truth. Seeking is nice.
I would like, if possible, to be a little bit selfless and making sure our questions are short, so that we actually pass the mic on as many as possible.
Can I just make a point? Can I talk to you a bit later?
That includes you as well.
Exact example, real life.
So let me just, okay.
Demand, supply, and labor cost.
Right.
Your point about food manufacturers not wanting to kill their customers.
Yeah.
Well, that's not exactly true. We have a long history in the West of food manufacturers making their customers sick. You know how sausages were made in Chicago in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, novels in the early 1900s, right? And you know what about the Chinese food manufacturers actually killing outright their customers? How do you reconcile this
Two things.
with this observable fact?
Two things. One, China is not a capitalist economy. Not a capitalist economy. And the United States, who imports food, is not capitalist when it comes to food. It's the FDA's responsibility to check that food, and they don't do it. It's a government failure. That's what it is. In terms of Chicago in the early 20th century, don't believe everything you read. The guy who wrote the famous novel was a propagandist. He was a propagandist of the progressive movement, trying to discredit capitalism, and he would have written anything to discredit capitalism. But
Was it accurate though?
no, he wasn't. He wasn't accurate. He lied. He lied like all the progressive lied.
How can you
Well, let me finish. You're not letting me finish. But you can refute it based on two things. People have actually gone and done the research, and they don't find it true. But second, look, in the development of capitalism, standards, it takes time for standards to be established. There's no question that early on, the standards was not as safe as later on. People have to learn what works and what doesn't work. There's no platonic knowledge that allows us to know before we actually test. But what would happen in a free market, in a true free market? What would happen today if the Food and Drug Administration in America went away? And you know, it's already happening to some extent. So for example, there's a network, a radio network, I know those of you who've been to America probably know this, NPR, National Public Radio. It's a very leftist radio program, but very intellectual. And I listen to it every morning and every afternoon when I drive to work and I drive back. Because I want to know what the enemy thinks. And also, because they're intellectual, so they're interesting. So they've run a number of stories recently about food safety. And it's fascinating that what they do is they talk about all the safety procedures that these people have put into place. And then they sneak in there, they just say it quickly so you won't actually hear it. They say that the people who are imposing these constraints is not the FDA. Who is it? Who imposes restrictions on farmers to make sure that the food is clean and healthy and good? Who do you think's?
companies themselves?
Yeah, supermarkets, the buyers. The buyers, because the buyers know that if they sell something that has bad stuff, they will lose money. And they have hired consultants who specialize in doing what? In doing exactly that. It works much better than the government, much better than any government attempt. Now, let me finish. I haven't finished.
Components to food manufacturers, and I am telling you, what you're saying, this theory, is not observable.
In America, it is observable fact in America. And it's observable fact in America. Look, are they going to be crooks? Are they going to be people who want to get short-term gain by poisoning their clients? Yes. Can a market system develop mechanisms to catch them and stop them? Absolutely. Are these mechanisms better than government mechanisms? 1,000 times better than the government mechanisms. I mean, people are poisoned today in America with food, with all the food safety that the government imposes.
Okay.
Government is not our protector.
Moving on. For the gentleman waiting for a long time. Then over there.
A very quick question.
Coming
Yes.
back there. And there.
Dr. Brook, how can you separate this fundamental fact? We seem to be obliged to operate, think on two levels, always at once. And this is a particularly difficult activity. Now, you mentioned very clearly earlier on that man is characterized by this capacity for intellectual calculation. Right? Don't you think that this is what led man forward, combined with the other instinct for reciprocity, the capacity to retort, the capacity to offer kindness for kindness, or a wonder for a wonder. Now this, the second part, this instinct for reciprocity, is it not the essence of ethics?
No.
No.
It's not the essence of ethics. Now, I don't think it's an instinct, first of all. There's no instinct for reciprocity. There is self-interest in reciprocity because of what I explained before. It's a trade. It's a win-win. And the first guy who, I don't know, was growing, wasn't even growing, was making tools and discovered that he could specialize in making tools and then trade for the meat from the hunter and trade, and they're both better off. That wasn't an instinct. That was a realization. It was probably a very complex realization that both are better off, and wow, trading is good. Trade is the essence of a market economy. That reciprocity is not just the essence of a market economy, it's the essence of human relationships. At the spiritual level, at the material level, that trading is the essence of what it means to engage in society. But that is not what morality, that's not the essence of morality. Morality is not about the other. Morality is about you. This is again Aristotle's lesson to us. Morality is about what you can do for yourself, and it turns out that one of the best things you can do for you is to trade with other people. And that coercing other people, engaging in force, is actually not good for you. That what's good for you is that mutually beneficial reciprocity. But that's because it's good. But that has to be learned. It's not an instinct in my view.
Moving on. Gentleman at the second row.
According to your thesis, your opinion about altruism, does it follow that you believe in no-interventionist foreign policy?
So do I believe in a non-interventionist policy? Well, it depends what you mean by intervention. If you mean by intervention going to other countries and trying to establish democracy and helping them out, or humanitarian aid, I believe in a non-interventionist foreign policy. But if you mean that somebody comes and attacks me, that I don't go and destroy him, then I believe in intervention. Right? So if somebody attacks me, I believe that the state has a moral obligation to defend its citizens and to do whatever is necessary to defend them. But to just lash out.
I am talking about foreign countries.
Yeah, foreign countries. So if I'm from Israel, right? So if Syria invades Israel, Israel should crush Syria. Right? If Mexico invades America, America should crush Mexico. If America invades Mexico, the Mexicans should crush America, right? They couldn't do it, but you know, luckily America's not invading Mexico. Mexicans invading America. So if it's an act of self-defense, if somebody, and just to make it more controversial, because that was too simple, right? If somebody tells you, I'm building a nuclear weapon and I might use it against you, you have a moral obligation to destroy them before they have the opportunity. And you can figure out who I'm talking about.
Moving on. Okay. Mikey, the gentleman.
Okay. I would like to put in the picture, you put Plato and Aristotle in the picture. I would like to put in the picture Thucydides, the great historian, who says that the people are not so good because at the end they are vicious and greed. Okay, that's why we create institutions to be together with a better way. Okay. Now I would like to comment something, to make a comment. I know that the best performance for the world was under the Keynesian ideas from 1950 to 1975, where the rate of development was 6% around the world. After 1980, when Thatcher and Reagan came to the power and the free ideas, this rate of development has felt a lot. Okay, why you think that we don't have to return back to Keynesian ideas?
Because they don't work.
But they worked.
No, let me finish. 1952 to 1960s were not a Keynesian era.
It was a Keynesian era.
Let me finish. Germany, which grew very fast during that period, was not being run by Keynesian. It was run by a classical liberal. I forget his name.
It's not by classical liberal. No.
Earhart, who was not a Keynesian.
No. It was according to effective demand.
No, it wasn't.
And the money comes to America and they create a lot of factories, whatever, and it was under the demand economics, not under the supply side economics. This is the truth.
So you're gonna let me answer now?
Yes.
So I disagree with your interpretation of history. This is not true. The reason Europe grew so fast is purely supply. Whose supply? America's supply. America had the ability to build and create and ship to Europe the product to build it up. The demand wasn't created by printing money or by government. It was created, particularly in Germany, and Germany is the prime example of this, by a privatization that Earhart went into, right? He refused to inflate the currency. The currency was very, very tightly controlled. Indeed, Germany didn't even have inflation in the 60s and 70s. They controlled it so tightly. They did not run deficits. They did not deficit fund the growth. They lowered taxes. And they refused to have price controls. In spite of what the Americans told them. The Americans said, we need price controls, we need to inflate. Earhart refused to listen to the Americans and engage in what is one of the great experiments of classical liberal economics, of actually freeing up the market in Germany to allow supply-driven, business-driven, production-driven recovery. If there hadn't been a Marshall Plan, Europe would have still recovered. I believe the Marshall Plan probably hindered that recovery because it was Keynesian. Every single time, just ask the Japanese for the last 22 years, every time Keynesianism has been tried, it fails. And it's not true that that was the fastest period of growth. The fastest period of growth was between 1862 and 1914. Far exceeded your 6%. And by the way, GDP is a horrible number. You shouldn't use it. I use it and I apologize for using it. I just don't know what a better number is. The problem with GDP is that it assumes that government spending is an increase in the economy. It's a growth thing. So for example, during World War II, the United States GDP went up 12% in 1 year. 12%. What happened to standard of living? It went down.
Because we had the war.
Yeah.
After the war.
No, let me finish. So how can GDP go like this and standard of living go like that? What does GDP even mean? GDP is a useless number, particularly during wars and catastrophes. Wars see a standard of living decline. Wars are economically destructive. It drives me like a Bastiat wrote about this in the 19th century. It's called the broken window fallacy. Look it up. It is one of the most important pieces ever written in the history of economics. Henry Hazlitt, in Economics in One Lesson, a book I recommend to everybody, modernizes it. But this is the idea of the broken window fallacy. You want to create economic growth? Get a kid to take a rock and smash all the windows. Because if you break all the windows, it creates economic growth, right? Because you have to repair all the windows. So a window maker has to be hired and he has to buy some raw materials and you make windows and GDP goes up. But are we better off after the new windows are in than we were before? No, we're in the same place. So what GDP growth? That's ridiculous. Nothing happened. Nothing got better. Nothing improved. What's the fallacy? What would have we used the money for that we use now for windows? What would the money have been used for if not for the windows? For something else. For something new. For something better. So if we hadn't broken all the windows, we would be better off. Breaking stuff, wars, are awful economics. They're bad economic policy for everybody. Everybody is worse off because of a war. Even America. If they had never been in World War II, if Germany had been willing to trade freely with America, both Germany and America would have been better off after World War II than given the war. Wars are bad. There's nothing good economically about the war. And to pretend that GDP goes up during a war is insane. It's economic insanity. And this is the problem with Keynesians. If you give people to dig holes and then fill them back in, GDP goes up. No.
I'm sorry, there is a proviso. Provided you have factors of production unemployed, then of course it can...
Yes, but even that assumes a static model. There are always factors of production that are unemployed. Because the factors of production are this. There's always new ideas, there are always entrepreneurs, there are always new things that can be deployed if the resources, if the capital, if the freedom is there to deploy them. Economics is not a static model where the factors of production are given. The factors of production are continuously changing based on entrepreneurship and innovation. So we can't treat them as constant. Money doesn't just sit there. I mean, Silicon Valley proves this. I mean, there are no factors of production in Silicon Valley. This is the only factor of production. And this is unlimited. Julian Simon showed us that the only limited resource is up here, and our imagination is the limit. So we haven't even come close to using this factor of production. So I don't believe that it's only under that condition. I believe it's always true that if you give people to dig holes, they're not really creating economic activity. Better economic activity would be created if you left it free, if you let people use their money the way they see fit. So no, Keynesianism doesn't work, never has worked, never will work.
What about FDR?
Please, sorry, excuse me, sorry. Excuse me, sir, excuse me.
Yes, and it failed.
Yeah.
So when FDR...
Sorry.
Let me just answer this quickly, because it's a fallacy that exists everywhere. When FDR came into office, unemployment was 15%, something like that. When World War II broke out, unemployment was the same. Between the beginning, just look at the numbers. I'm not making this up, look at the numbers. Between 32 and 39, the economy of the United States was flat. FDR did nothing. He prolonged the Great Depression. He made it worse. He made living conditions, standard of living, unemployment, economic production worse under his tenure. Keynesianism never works. Never, with a capital E, never works.
All right, sorry, can we go there, over there?
Go ahead. Sure.
Hello. I would like to ask a question. Concerning Christianity and the morals of capitalism, you said that the ancient Greek philosophy didn't have the same notion of selfless sacrifice as Christianity does. But even if they didn't have that, they didn't have the notion of hubris, like when somebody rises above the others, they have to come down somehow. It would be like divine punishment or something. And also, reading Dawkins, who you cannot blame of being a Christian, really, he also says that we have evolved to have a moral code, and we know it's wrong to kill, it's wrong to steal, and it's right and virtuous to help our neighbors. So what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is like Wilson said that the communists had a great theory but the wrong species. Maybe is it the same?
I disagree with both Dawkins and with the Greeks.
But it's not human nature.
It's not human nature. It's lunatics.
It's not human nature.
What's that?
Altruism.
Altruism is not human nature. It's not in your nature to sacrifice for other people. Let me ask you this. If there's a burning house, and your children in one room, and the neighbor's children in the other room, whose children are you going to save first?
My children,
That's it.
the children in their world or in the other.
Exactly. That's it. There's no
I will
instinct to
sacrifice myself for my children.
for your children.
Yes,
But for
but
what
I
about?
will sacrifice
But
myself.
that's selfish. But would you do it for other people's children?
I would sacrifice myself.
I understand. So would I. But would you do it for other people's children? No.
I don't have my own sacrifice.
Look,
All cultures.
if there was an instinct for altruism, you would save the neighbor's children first. There's no instinct for altruism. There's an instinct for self-preservation, but there's no instinct. There's choices. There are choices that we make. There's value systems that we adopt. Dawkins is wrong because he can perceive everything only through genes. But the fact is that human beings... No, Dawkins, look, I've debated Dawkins. Dawkins is a secularized Christian. I mean, it's sad, but he is, because his moral code is pure Christianity. He doesn't challenge any status quo in terms of his moral code, and that's true of all the new atheists. All the new atheists, unfortunately, accepted Christian morality unchallenged. They just question mysticism. What's that? What they
from being indoctrinated.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing unself-interested in kindness, in helping other people, in being charitable. All those are consistent with self-interest. But altruism means a negation of self. That is not in our nature. It's not instinctual. It's only taught, and almost nobody actually does it consistently. They don't do it.
We're organizing this out of our own pockets exactly for this reason, because we are striving for our rational self-interest. So we're helping doing that.
I personally agree with your conclusions regarding free markets and capitalism, but I feel I haven't fully grasped the moral argument, because to me it still seems incomplete. Because you stress so much the first step, to say that self-interest is good. I would also agree with that, but there must be a second element that's a bit blurred to me, because based on self-interest you could still conclude, yes, you're right, but since I'm stupid, I don't have ideas, it's still better for me to rob people. Or even the medieval robber baron would agree with that. So there must be a second element to actually arrive at the conclusions we agree on. But this, I think, that you seem to make more practical point. Well, it may seem to you that lying works, but it doesn't really work. But as a sort of direction here, and I confirm the same for my country, I'm German, lots of people get away with lying and stealing, unfortunately.
No, they get away with it, it's not in their self-interest.
I'm not interested in the practical point, but the moral point, the second step that you make to actually arrive at the conclusion that you want.
I made the second point, but you're not accepting it, and that's okay, but you're not. The second point is this. The second point is that the primary value, if you're self-interested, is rationality, is reason. And is reason, if we accept that the means of human survival is reason, is rationality. Maybe we don't, but I think it is. That the tool for making a better life is thinking, is understanding. Then I think everything else follows. Now, yes, you could write long books about what that means, and books have been written, and I can't condense all of that into a lecture. But for example, I believe that an essential virtue in morality is productiveness. Productiveness means, earning your living, earning the ability to live for yourself. That is, making the stuff that allows you to survive. Being productive. I think productiveness is essential for self-esteem. I don't think, morally, theoretically, and practically, because I don't think there's a conflict between practical and moral, that if you want to have self-esteem, you have to have the knowledge that you can take care of yourself. A thief is living off of other people. A welfare recipient is living off of other people. A liar is living off of other people. Therefore, they never get the sense of, I can take care of myself. I can produce, in reality, I can produce the stuff that makes it possible for me to live. And remember, my context is self-interest. It's me. And if I don't have the sense that I can take care of myself, that I can make the stuff that makes my life possible, I can never have self-esteem. I believe self-esteem is essential for human happiness. So yes, people can People can pretend, people can smile, and people can say, lie and steal and cheat, and they can, sleep around and do all this stuff, and they look happy. But I believe that philosophically, morally, and psychologically, to attain happiness, flourishing in the Aristotelian sense, one can only do that by attaining self-esteem. To attain self-esteem, one has to have that knowledge that I can take care of myself. Even poor people. A good friend of mine's grandfather was a bricklayer. He went every day, laid bricks on construction site, and worked long hours, long days. But every day he came home with the knowledge, deep down, that he was providing for himself and for his family. That he was feeding, he was taking care of the people he loved. And that gave him a sense of pride, it gave him a sense of self-esteem, and an inner confidence and happiness that no welfare recipient will ever have in his life. The biggest victims of the welfare state are the people who get the money. Are the people who get the money, because we deprive them of that sense of pride. We deprive them of that sense of self-esteem. And so the morality is much, you need to flesh it out in all these directions. But the fundamental is there's no conflict between moral and practical. They're the same. The moral is the practical. It works. And the practical turns out to be the moral. If something truly leads to human flourishing, generalizable, not somebody who's sick and, gets a kick of hurting other people and is an aberration, but generally, right? Then it's probably good. Moral. There's a close relationship. But for this, what I recommend is, I don't think it's in Greek yet, but maybe we can have it translated one day, is The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand, an essay where she elaborates on this. And their books, Tara Smith, who's the chair of the philosophy of Ayn Rand at the University of Texas in Austin, in the philosophy department, has a book, Viable Values, which is just a book on Ayn Rand's ethics, which elaborates this in great detail.
Okay, we have time for 3 more questions, I'm afraid. So we're going to have, I'm afraid, the gentleman here, the gentleman at the back over there, and this gentleman here who came first, I'm afraid. So sorry for the rest, but I'm pretty sure that can have a very quick chat, follow-ups, but afterwards. But that's for the time being, because I think the time is moving on. So.
Thank you for this opportunity. What do you think of the Tea Party movement, and why is it that it is so misunderstood in every single country of the world, including half the United States?
I think the Tea Party movement is a movement with the right emotion, but no ideas. So what the Tea Party movement is an emotional response to the state. The state has grown big, it's oppressive, they feel like there's something wrong, they know that America means something different, they know that the principles on which America was founded are being violated, and they emotionally have risen up and said, stop, enough. And in that sense, I think they're wonderful. They're fantastic, they're good, they represent the best in America. On the other hand, they don't understand why. They're non-intellectual. And this is the problem. This is why they often say contradictory things. They sometimes say stupid things. They're also very, very religious. So while they want the government off their backs when it comes to economics, they want the government to intervene in our lives when it comes to social policy, right? So they send a mixed message, and they're not intellectual. My view is they're a good phenomena that need to be educated. They need the intellectual ammunition to make them better, right? To make them successful. And that's I view as our job as intellectuals, is to go there and try to teach them, try to educate them. And they're open to them. They're a portion within the American population that's open to being talked to. But the reason people look down on them is because they're religious, because they come across as, they're from the South, they've got funny accents, and they come across as unintellectual. And they have contradictions, and people play off of those contradictions. But everybody has contradictions. The left has bigger contradictions, and nobody makes fun of those.
In Greece, there's a tendency for people to choose jobs in the public sector. And I remember in one of your lectures, you said that it is a bad idea for any state to have a large number of people working in the public sector instead of the private sector. I would like you to elaborate on that.
The public sector is a zero-sum game. Actually, it's a negative-sum game. But it's not a wealth creator game, right? The public sector doesn't build and create anything. It doesn't create wealth. So how do you pay public sector employees? There's only one way to do it. By taxing the productive. By taxing the wealth creator. In other words, by stealing other people's money and paying for them. Now, just from a pure economic perspective, as the public sector grows, the private sector is going to shrink because there's only a finite number of people. So you're taxing fewer and fewer and fewer people to give to more and more and more people. But that is a game that cannot last very long. These people, their tax rates are going to go up. Are they going to stop working? Are they going to move to another country? Are they going to stop at the margin adding on because it's not worth their while to do it? And how are you going to pay these guys? You can print money, but you're taxing them by printing money, right? Printing money is just a tax. So you can't pay them. It runs out. It's impossible. Now, I'm not even talking about the moral aspect of stealing from this group to give to another group. That's all wrong. But just from a practical economic perspective, it's not sustainable. So what you want is a huge private sector where wealth is created, where people are making stuff, look, every time we trade, wealth is created because we're both better off. We had a utility or something like a utility of 8 before the trade. Now it's up to 9. Where did that 1 come from? From the trade, from the innovation that was involved in the trade. That's it. Voluntary trade, private sector trade is continuously wealth creating, is continuously wealth added. And then you want a tiny little public sector that only does one thing. And that protects the private sector from those crooks and liars and cheaters and the people who want to poison us and all that stuff. That's it. That's all it does. And it leaves the private sector alone to grow and flourish so that wealth can be created and everybody can become better off.
Okay. Last question, I'm afraid, until we bring Dr. Brook back because there are so many questions. So please wait.
Is it the last question? I can sell it. No,
that's right. We should auction off the last question.
I agree with you. Individual rights are of utmost importance, but I don't understand the philosophy. Is it a political philosophy? Is it a moral philosophy? Is it? I don't know how to classify it. That's my question. If you can enlighten me on this. And my friend here was a baker. He's going to give me cookies if I ask this question because he doesn't speak English. He wants to know your opinion on globalization and what impact it will have on this.
So let me take the first question first. This is a philosophy. It's a metaphysical philosophy, an epistemological philosophy, a moral philosophy, a political philosophy, and we even have an aesthetic philosophy. And they're all integrated. They're all connected. So for example, you say you agree with individual rights, the most important political concept, and I agree. In politics, individual rights are the basis for everything. But where do they come from? God? I don't believe in God. And that's not a reasoned answer. So where do individual rights come from? You need a moral philosophy to justify individual rights. So in my view, individual rights come from this phenomenon. For individuals to survive in reality, they need to use their minds. They need to be able to reason and be rational. As I said in the talk, the enemy of reason and rationality is force, is coercion. Therefore, we need a concept, we need an idea to bridge the model which says you should be free to use your mind as you see fit with how we live in a society. That's called individual rights. Individual rights say, individual rights mean, right, that you have the freedom to use your mind and to act on it as you see fit. Nobody has a right to coerce you. Why is that a good thing? Because of the moral issue, right? So my morality, my moral code, I believe that rational self-interest is the foundation for individual rights, and which is the foundation for a political philosophy of freedom, of limited government. But you cannot defend individual rights without a moral foundation. And this is why we failed. This is my argument. We failed because the founding fathers of America said their individual rights, Locke said, their individual rights, they come from God, or they come from nature, they just are. And other people say, I don't see them. I believe my moral responsibility is sacrifice to you. And, you know, and you're not sacrificing enough, so all I have to do is force you to sacrifice for him. Why is that bad? And you say, wait, I have an individual right. And I say, I don't see it. My argument is that morally, you have a right to your life. Morally. And that morality comes from your choice to live, and the requirements of your life are to think, and that thought requires that I don't force you to do anything, even if I think you're wrong. Even if I'm trying to save you from yourself. I don't have a right to force myself on you.
Globalization question?
So it's a moral code that allows for individual rights, which allows for political philosophy.
So you believe there's no trade-offs?
Trade-off between rights?
Individual rights and civil rights?
No, there's no trade-off. I do not believe in trade-off of rights. Once you accept that, then we're in a mixed economy. We're trading. We're bartering on. No. Individual rights are absolutes. You do not have a right to coerce your neighbor. That's it. The state has no right to coerce you, no matter how good its intentions are, no matter how wonderful its leadership is, no matter how smart the economists are. They don't have a right to force you to do something you do not want to do, unless you're violating somebody else's rights, which means you're using coercion on somebody else. That's it. So as long as you're not stealing, lying, if you're not stealing or cheating or defrauding somebody else, the state must leave you alone. Globalization. Globalization is wonderful. It's wonderful even in the mixed economy we live today. It raises the standard of living, I think, overall. But to benefit from it, if we really want to benefit from globalization, we need to free up our economies. The more rigid our economies are, the more some people will suffer because of globalization. But if we freed up the economy, if Greece tomorrow became a capitalist country, a laissez-faire capitalist country, it would be the greatest beneficiary from globalization possible. Because division of labor is good. Adam Smith showed this, Bastiat showed it. The number of economists showing this is, even Paul Krugman has shown this. That's why he won a Nobel Prize. People don't know this. But Paul Krugman won a Nobel Prize for an article advocating for free trade. This is before he became a lying, cheating SOB, right? A political hack, not an economist, which is what he is today. So, division of labor is good in an economy. Expanding the division of labor globally makes everybody who's working, everybody who can produce better off if they're free. So if it's good, it would be better if we were all capitalists. That's a good way to end it. Let's all be capitalists.
Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for making the rational decision to be here tonight. And tomorrow we have another lecture at Thessaloniki, so it will be great